Imagine for a moment that your entire life you've been taught to believe a lie disguised as virtue. Since childhood, the voices closest to you, parents, teachers, religions, books, society, have repeated the same mantra. Helping is always the right thing to do. Being good meant always being available, never denying a request, never closing a door. Love was confused with obedience. Generosity was transformed into obligation. Spirituality became measured by your ability to sacrifice. You grew up hearing that saying no was selfish, that imposing limits was a lack of compassion, that caring for yourself before others was a sign of coldness. And then, without realizing it, you were molded to carry burdens, trying to heal wounds you couldn't reach. But what would happen if Napoleon Hill told you that all of this is a distortion of the natural laws that govern human evolution? Hill used to say that not every act of kindness is love, and not all love is kindness. He believed that true virtue, not acting out of pity, but understanding when helping ceases to liberate and begins to imprison. In his most profound writings, he spoke of the law of cause and effect as a force that brooks no interference. Each being must reap what they sow, learn from what they reap, transform learning into growth. When you interfere with this process, and you prevent someone from facing the consequences of choices, you interrupt the flow of wisdom. And that's precisely where what we call love becomes an illusion. Think about the times you've gone to great lengths to solve someone's problem. Sleepless nights, the repeated advice, the sacrifices disguised as generosity. How many times have you believed you were saving someone, when in fact, you were just postponing the inevitable? Hill said that the soul that is constantly protected never discovers its own strength. And there's a painful truth to that. Pain, mistakes, and failure are not punishments. They are teachers. They are the only things capable of shattering pride, dissolving fear, and revealing the power that lies dormant within. But when you rush to save someone from suffering, you deprive them of learning. It's like ripping the cocoon from a butterfly before it can even struggle to emerge. What emerges from this is not freedom, it is deformity. Napoleon Hill believed that the human mind is a field of creative energy, and that each being is responsible for shaping their own reality through the vibration of their thoughts. Helping someone the wrong way is like entering their mental field and using the frequencies. It's vibrational interference. When you try to resolve what doesn't belong to you, you're removing the other person from the school of life and placing them in an artificial comfort zone. No transformation is born from comfort. No strength develops where there is no resistance. Therefore, Hill stated that blind compassion is the chief cause of the failure of the strong. He wasn't encouraging coldness, but teaching that true love is wisdom in motion. A love that understands when to retreat is more powerful than the love that insists on remaining. Modern society, however, venerates sacrifice as if it were the ultimate expression of kindness. It exalts those who give themselves to the point of exhaustion, those who bear the pain of others, those who constantly put out fires they didn't start. But Hill saw this as one of humankind's most destructive mental traits. For him, constant sacrifice is a disguise for fear. The fear of being rejected, appearing insensitive, of losing control over the love of others. When you say yes to everyone, you're trying to maintain the acceptance your ego fears losing. Deep down, it's not altruism. It's emotional dependence masquerading as when the price is high. Exhaustion, frustration, emptiness, and the feeling of always being surrounded by people who only consume but never reciprocate. Hill saw this as a spiritual inversion. He said that the person who lives to please the world becomes its slave. They surrender their own power, their creative energy, their ability to decide. It's like a flame slowly dying out as it tries to illuminate all sides at once. There comes a point at which excessive kindness turns into self-destruction. And the curious thing is that society applauds this process. It calls exhaustion virtue, suffering heroism, submission, humility. Napoleon Hill saw this pattern as a form of emotional slavery imposed by collective beliefs. The man who lives to save everyone else, he wrote, ends losing himself and saving no one. The human mind, according to Hill, operates under universal laws, and one of them is balance. Every action, every intention, generates a proportional reaction. When you overstep the bounds of someone else's responsibility, the universe corrects, not as punishment, but as restoration. The energy you give without wisdom returns as fatigue, demotivation, sense of injustice. It's the law warning you. You're interfering where you shouldn't. Balance is restored through pain, if not through awareness. This is why many generous people end up surrounded by drains, where they give everything and receive almost nothing. It's not bad luck, it's a vibrational imbalance. There is, however, an essential difference between helping and interfering. Helping is extending a hand to someone who wants to get up. Interfering is carrying someone who refuses to walk. Helping is inspiring someone to awaken their strength. Interfering is robbing them of the opportunity to discover their own power. Hill explained that the creative mind of each being awakens only when forced to act, when faced with a challenge. Without challenge, there is no development. Therefore, when you assume responsibility for another's destiny, you prevent the birth of the strength that would make them independent. You imprison them in weakness. But why do we do this? Why do so many insist on saving others even when they know they're being used? Hill answered bluntly, because human beings fear their own insignificance. By helping, you feel needed. Being needed, feel alive. But this is a dangerous illusion, the kind that imprisons both the one being helped and the one helping. He called it a circle of spiritual dependence, a symbiosis between the savior and the one in need, where both feed on the same need. One doesn't want to change, the other doesn't want to stop being indispensable. A cycle of inverted energy that continues until consciousness awakens. There are times in life when true love demands withdrawal. He'll believe that the courage to step back is one of the highest forms of wisdom. When you step back, you're not giving up. You're allowing the laws of life to do the work your interference prevented. Silence is sometimes the teacher who teaches more than 1,000 pieces of advice. The limit is the boundary between respect and slavery. No is the most liberating word a conscious spirit can utter. Ultimately, this lesson isn't about harshness, but about clarity. It's about recognizing there's a difference between passion and complicity, between love and attachment, between kindness and submission. Napoleon Hill invites us to observe the world with the eyes of discernment, help when there's potential for growth, and to retreat when the other refuses to evolve. Because a true master doesn't burden his students, he simply shines the light so they can see the path. And it is at this point that Hill's message becomes almost prophetic. He said that humanity will only awaken when it understands that pain is an ally, not an enemy, that every failure has a purpose, and that constant interference impedes wisdom from acting. When you let life teach you, suffering becomes transformation. When you impede it, suffering repeats itself. Therefore, sometimes the most loving gesture, also the most misunderstood, to step aside, to allow the other to fall, to watch in silence, as universal law does what none of us can do for other. Napoleon Hill believed that destiny is a collaborative effort between humankind and the divine, but each soul must sculpt its own part. Helping too much is invading the sacred territory of learning. It's like entering destiny's workshop and trying to finish a sculpture that isn't yours. The result will always be imperfect, because the artist of transformation experiences itself. And then the question arises that echoes like a mirror. How many times was your generosity, without realizing it, a form of escape? How many times have you helped out of fear of looking into your... How many times was your compassion merely a disguise for the fear of being alone? Hill wouldn't condemn you for this, he would understand, because he also believed that error is a necessary stage of awakening. Consciousness arises from the contrast between who we are and who we believe ourselves to be. In the end, his message is simple, and to truly love is to trust the laws that govern the soul's growth. It's knowing when to reach out and when to let go. It's understanding that each person has the sacred right to learn through their own. Interference feels like love, but it's control. Distance feels like coldness, faith. Wisdom is the balance between the two. And perhaps this is the most difficult lesson Napoleon Hill tried to teach us. Your job is not to save the world, understand it. And by understanding it, transform yourself. Because true good is not born of sacrifice, but of awareness. And only when you understand this deeply, silently, do you discover the true meaning of help. And then the question arises that opens the portal to the next revelation. If not all help is love, what really is? There comes a time in life when the soul, tired of giving, begins to wonder if it's truly helping or just slowly losing. It's a silent questioning, born after many attempts, many disappointments, and an exhaustion that comes out from the bottom of the spirit. Napoleon Hill understood this breaking point. He said there's an invisible line between the love that builds and the love that destroys, and that crossing it opens the door to self-sabotage. The problem is, most people don't realize when they've crossed that line. They continue to believe that being good means never stopping serving, never denying help, never allowing themselves to. And so, little by little, they become prisoners of their own compassion. Hill observed that the human mind has a dangerous tendency to confuse giving with value. We think we'll be more loved the more we sacrifice, that others will respect us if we remain, but the opposite is actually true. What begins as an act of generosity soon turns into a pattern of dependency. He called this the circle of mutual weakening, a cycle in which the helper loses energy and the recipient loses will. It's a symbiosis disguised as virtue. The giver believes they're being altruistic, while the receiver believes they're being saved, but both are moving away from the truth. Think about how many times you've reached out to someone who seemed to desperately need you. Perhaps a friend always in trouble, a relative who constantly complains about life's injustices, or even a colleague who uses your patience as a refuge. At first, you feel a noble impulse to support. You want to see the person well. You want to believe that this time will be different. Time passes, and the pattern repeats itself. The Problems return, promises of change evaporate. There you are again, solving, soothing, supporting. Deep down, you sense something is wrong. You're afraid of appearing insensitive, and so you convince yourself that love must be unconditional, even if it costs you your peace. Napoleon Hill called this type of relationship an investment without spiritual return. He said that all energy, when it doesn't find a purpose for growth, turns into exhaustion. When you give to someone who doesn't want to change, you're not practicing love, practicing waste. True love, he said, kind that awakens strength in the other, not dependence. This awakening only happens when there's space for pain to do what it needs to do. It's paradoxical, but profoundly true. The more you try to protect someone from suffering, the more you keep them trapped in it. Hill once told a story that had a profound impact. He knew a man who had spent his life helping his younger brother. He paid his debts, found him jobs, and got him out of countless scrapes. For years, he believed he was saving him, but his brother never changed. Each new act of help was an invitation for the next. Till one day, the man realized he was ruining not only his brother's life, he decided to stop. For the first time, he let the other man deal with it. At first, he felt guilt, shame, and fear of others' judgment. Something unexpected happened. The brother, faced with the absence of a savior, began to change. He felt hunger, shame, and need. The urge to start over was born. He'll use this example to explain one of his simplest and most powerful laws. Strength develops only in the absence of support. This lesson seems cruel, but it is one of the purest forms of love. It is the love that believes in the other's capacity to grow. It is the love that trusts in the invisible laws of the universe, laws that Hill considered immutable. He said that every soul carries within itself the seed of its own progress, and that interfering with this process violates the natural order of helping someone who refuses to act is like watering lifeless soil. No flowers will grow, only weariness. But there's something deeper to this mechanism. Those who live by saving others are often, in fact, trying to save themselves. Hill observed that the need to be indispensable stems from insecurity. It's the fear of not being loved for who you are, so you seek to be loved for what you do. Helping becomes a way to secure affection. The danger is that when helping is motivated by need, it loses its purity and becomes a prison. You begin to measure your worth, how necessary you are, and when you're no longer needed, you feel empty. It's at this point that the giver and the needy become mirrors of each other. Both are afraid to face their own emptiness, and they hold each other close to avoid it. The cycle repeats itself in subtle ways. A mother who solves all her child's problems and prevents him from maturing. A partner who sacrifices himself for an unbalanced relationship, believing he's being faithful. A leader who takes responsibility for the team's failings to appear generous. Everyone acts with good intentions, but everyone pays the same price. Slow erosion. Hill said that the price of unwise help is one's own strength. Strength fades, chaos ensues. There's a common scene that illustrates. Imagine someone pushing a broken-down car down a long road. At first, the impulse is noble. You want to help. Car never starts, and road never ends. Body tires, sweat pours, sun weighs down your skin. Still, this person persists, believing that stopping would betray your kind nature. What would Napoleon Hill see in this? He would say that the real mistake isn't helping, but failing to realize when the car has already become a burden that prevents you from moving. And while you push what doesn't want to move, life passes by silent, wasted, waiting for you to realize that you weren't born to carry, but to create. Hill didn't deny the value of compassion, but called it a sacred energy that must be guided by reason. He believed the universe rewards discernment, not blind sight. A mind that acts in balance creates prosperity, but one that gives without wisdom cracks. This is one of humanity's least understood and most violated laws. Misdirected kindness turns into emotional corruption, an imbalance that contaminates the life. And there's an even more uncomfortable truth. Some people don't want to be. They want to be cared for, protected, held. They want others to feel guilty for being stronger than them. Hill saw this as an unconscious manipulation of vital energy. These are people who have learned to survive by draining the strength of those they love. And when you get close to them, you feel an exhaustion you can't explain. They don't ask for anything from you. They just take, little by little. Hill said that the aimless mind is an open house for the weakness of others. If you don't protect your own energy, the world will find 1,000 ways to consume it. At some point on this journey, the inevitable question arises, how do you know when to stop? Hill responded that there is one sure sign when help fails to produce transformation. If, after all your effort, the situation remains the same, it's because your energy is being wasted. Waste, for him, was a form of mental sin. Nothing destroys the soul faster than the feeling of uselessness. Stopping, then, not giving up. Respecting the intelligence of giving space for others to find meat. Hill's wisdom doesn't ask us to be cold, but to be lucid. He believed that true compassion is conscious, not automatic. It's the kind that asks, am I helping someone grow or hindering them from learning? It's the kind that understands that pain has a purpose and that sometimes absence is the greatest. When you walk away from someone who needs to fall to get back up, you're not abandoning them. You're giving back to the universe the power to teach. And perhaps life's most beautiful mystery lies in this: the moment the heart finally understands that letting go is a form of love. Because there are people who will only find their own light when your own shine ceases to protect them. And in that instant, something within you transforms you. The soul that has learned to stop saving discovers a new kind of peace, the peace of one who has understood that love without wisdom is not love, but attachment. And it is from this point that Hill's teaching deepens even further. There are people who drain us, also those who teach us the power of gratitude, and it is they who reveal the true meaning of giving. There's a kind of weariness that doesn't come from the body, but from the soul, the kind born of giving everything to someone who sees no value. Napoleon Hill used to say that ingratitude is spiritual bankruptcy of man. He was right. There's no deeper wound than realizing that your giving has been received as something commonplace, almost invisible. The ungrateful person is a mirror of humanity when it fits its connection with the invisible. They welcome the sun every day and complain about the heat. They drink from the source of life and question the taste of the water. Hill saw this not as a moral defect, but as an energetic blockage, rupture between the mind and higher consciousness. Ingratitude doesn't just destroy relationships, it interrupts the natural flow of abundance. Because everything that is not recognized weakens, everything that is taken for granted becomes sick. He explained that gratitude, the highest frequency of human thought, the state in which the mind aligns with the creative power of the universe. Being grateful isn't about giving thanks out of about recognizing the invisible source of all. When someone is unable to recognize the good they've received, they cut off their own access to prosperity. He'll observe that he who is not grateful for the little will never be ready for the much. Yet, we live surrounded by people who receive more than they give, who accept gestures of love as if they were rights. They treat help as an obligation and support as a duty. They don't realize that every act of kindness comes with an energetic price: time, effort, attention, presence. The ungrateful wastes the energy of others, like someone lighting a candle in the wind, carelessly, without awareness, without return. But what happens inside the heart of someone who is constantly ignored? Hill said that the overly generous person risks becoming skeptical. After giving so much and receiving so little, they begin to doubt even their own nature. What was once light becomes distance. Love becomes armor. And this is the greatest danger of ingratitude. It not only drains the receiver, it also poisons the giver. The soul ceases to trust in the world's reciprocity. Fear of giving, a fear of being used, fear of believing arises. This is how kindness dies, not from a lack of love, from an excess of disappointment. And then the inevitable question arises like a whisper: have you been given to those who value you, or just to those who consume you? Hill believed that ingratitude is the first symptom of a mind that has lost touch with spiritual reality. He said that people who don't give thanks believe deep down that the universe owes them something. They live in a constant state of need and demand, asking for more without realizing how much they've already received. But there's an irony in that: the more they demand, the less they receive. The universe doesn't respond to demand, it responds to vibration. A grateful mind expands, a demanding mind contracts. The difference is invisible but absolute. This is why some seem to attract opportunities and others only complain about the ones they missed. Hill called this the law of mental reflex. What you project into the world returns at the same frequency. If you project scarcity, you receive scarcity. If you project gratitude, you open the doors to abundance. He once told the story of a businessman who had helped dozens of people throughout his life, funding their studies, lending money, offering them jobs, but no one ever thanked him. One day, broke and ill, he asked Hill if the universe had been unfair to him. Hill calmly replied, "The universe owes you nothing. The good you did was not lost, it was simply sown on barren soil." The phrase resonated deeply, and therein lies the difference between wise and unconscious help. The fertile soil of gratitude multiplies what it receives. The arid soil of selfishness merely absorbs. The lesson then is clear. Not every field deserves seed. But there is another, even more subtle obstacle. The proud are the twin brothers. They also refuse to recognize the value of others, but not out of ingratitude, out of fear. The fear of appearing small, the fear of admitting their need. Hill saw pride as the wall that separates man from wisdom. The proud are blind men who believe they see more than everyone else. When someone is dominated by pride, they turn every piece of advice into an attack and every piece of help into a threat. They don't seek growth, they seek victory. Their identity is trapped in the illusion of always being right. But what is pride trying to hide? Hill argued that pride is merely a disguised form of insecurity. The proud man fears discovering he doesn't know as much as he thinks. Therefore, he rejects any voice that might shatter the image he's created. He doesn't fear error, he fears the mirror. And that's precisely why the proud man falls. Sooner or later, life shows that no castle built on vanity. Hill saw in this process a law of balance. The fall of the arrogant is the price of his refusal. And then comes the disconcerting reflection. Have you surrounded yourself with people who listen or people who just wait their turn to speak? Pride doesn't just destroy relationships with others, it destroys relationships with one's own wisdom. Because truth doesn't impose itself, it offers itself. And when the ego is in control, truth goes unnoticed, even when it screams. Hill believed that a closed mind is the greatest prison there is, for neither love nor logic nor fate can penetrate it. Pain does. Pride forces man to fall, to relearn the humility that could have saved him. But there's something curious, Hill observed. The fall of the proud is not always visible. Sometimes it happens silently, with soul. He continues walking, talking, appearing strong, but inside, the light goes out. Outward success disguises inner failure. Hill said this is the saddest kind of ruin, because the world applauds him while his spirit crumbles. The man who lives with a spiritual appearance is the furthest from the truth. He speaks of faith, but fears silence. He speaks of light, but feeds on vanity. He speaks of love, but seeks admiration. All of this makes him increasingly empty. Then another question arises, like a thread of light among the shadows. What is more dangerous? Losing something, or never realizing that you have already lost yourself? Hill believed that the cure for ingratitude and pride does not come from outside. No praise, no validation, no achievement is enough. Healing comes from recognizing error, the moment when a person looks into their own heart and sees how much they have wasted by believing themselves complete. When this awareness awakens, humility blossoms again. Gratitude is reborn. The cycle closes, and humankind returns to walking under the law of harmony. In the end, Hill wasn't just talking about behavior, but about energy. Every thought is a seed, every emotion a field. The ungrateful destroy the harvest before proud plant, but humble, the grateful, the conscious. These observe time, trust the process, and harvest in silence. This is the mind that builds destinies. This is the mind the universe chooses to expand. And perhaps this is the most hidden secret of Hill's words. Gratitude is more than a feeling. It is a creative force. It transforms what it touches, purifies what it and expands what it recognizes. Pride and ingratitude are shadows that steal the light of the spirit. The first prevents us from learning. The second prevents us from flourishing. And both imprison us in the same cycle, always waiting for something that was already within us from the beginning. But there's something most don't realize. Too late. The universe doesn't reward what you do. It rewards the intention that moves. And when that intention is born from a grateful and humble heart, the whole world reorganizes itself around. Not because the universe is good or bad, but because it is just. So perhaps the real question, the one that concludes this section and prepares the next, is this. Have you planted your actions in the soil of gratitude, soil of pride? There are forces on earth that cannot be seen, but that shape destinies with invisible precision. Napoleon Hill said that evil is not a supernatural entity, but an uncontrolled energy, a misuse of the mind. For him, evil is not born from nothing. It is someone who has understood the laws of life and chosen to use them against others. Evil, in Hill's view, is intelligence without conscience, and that is what makes some beings so dangerous. They are not ignorant. They are lucid enough to manipulate, deceive, and hurt, believing themselves to be above consequences. True danger lies not in the darkness, but in the mind that has learned to operate the laws of the universe and decided to reverse their poles. In one of his lesser-known lectures, Hill recounted a case that illustrates this view. He spoke of a man who mastered the techniques of persuasion. He was charismatic, kind, and always surrounded by people who admired him. He used words as instruments of enchantment. For years, he convinced investors, friends, and even religious figures to follow him on projects that never materialized. Each promise was the perfect bait. When someone became suspicious, he would cry, claim to be misunderstood, beg for forgiveness, and regain their trust. Throughout his life, he destroyed dozens of families and ruined fortunes, but he died surrounded by praise because, to the end, he maintained the guise of kindness. Hill said this man was the epitome of what he called soulless intelligence, one of the most advanced forms of mental corruption. For Hill, the line between light and shadow is much thinner than one. Evil rarely appears with a threatening face. It almost always arrives cloaked in virtue. It presents itself as the helpful friend, the wise counselor, the inspiring leader. Its skill is to perceive what you lack and to offer exactly that, until you depend on it. The wicked do not seek immediate destruction. They seek gradual domination. They feed on the naivete of others, but they do so with elegance. When Hill wrote that the devil works by the idle mind, he was describing this process. A mind without direction becomes open territory for forces that know how to use it. Interestingly, Hill believed that evil possessed a specific frequency. Just as fear vibrates at a lower frequency and love at a higher one, hatred and manipulation have a dense but powerful vibration. He argued that people with destructive tendencies create mental fields that contaminate their surroundings. That, upon contact with them, the distracted mind absorbs this pattern without realizing. Today, neuroscience studies refer to emotional resonance, the same phenomenon in parlance. Emotions truly propagate like waves. When we live with negative people for a long time, our brains begin to imitate their patterns. Hill predicted this decades earlier, calling it contagious mental influence. But not all who cause destruction are evil by choice. Some are foolish by stubbornness. Hill saw the fool as someone incapable of learning from pain. Unlike the malicious, the fool doesn't want to hurt, but persists in making mistakes. He believes life is unfair, and that bad luck follows him, unaware that he repeats the same behaviors that lead to failure. Hill said that unconscious repetition is the prison of the thoughtless. The fool engages in destructive relations, spends what he doesn't have, trusts those who have betrayed him, and is still surprised when everything falls apart again. No amount of advice can save him because he doesn't listen to learn. He listens to confirm that he doesn't need to change. Hill once visited a small town where a man had failed 3 times. Every time a new business emerged, there he was, enthusiastic, promising, confident that this time it was different. But he repeated the same mistakes, trusting the wrong people, ignoring warnings, spending beyond his means. When Hill questioned him, the man replied, "God is testing me." Hill smiled and said, "No, you're testing yourself, and you keep failing the same exam." The audience laughed, but the message was profound. The universe repeats lessons until they are learned. Stubbornness is a slow form of self-destruction. Here comes a nagging question. How many times have you called bad luck something that was just a repetition of didn't want to change? Hill believed that human suffering is divided into 2 types, that which purifies and that which repeats. The former serves to teach, the latter to warn that learning has been ignored. He said that a wise man feels pain, a fool infinitely, and that persistence in error is not a lack of intelligence, but of humility. Proud mind refuses to admit what it does not yet know, and so continues to stumble at the same point along the way. Interestingly, Hill associated this repetition with a kind of natural hypnosis. He studied the behavior of people who, even aware of their own mistakes, seemed unable to escape them. He concluded that habit is a form of mental enchantment. Just as the hypnotized obey the command they believe to be theirs, common man obeys the mental patterns he masters. Habit is the most faithful servant and the cruelest tyrant. The mind grows accustomed to what is familiar, even if it hurts. This is why many return to the same relationship, same job, the same routine of suffering. The familiar discomfort feels safer than the unfamiliar. Hill saw in this dynamic the great battle between the conscious and unconscious. The fool is the one who allows himself to be dragged along by repetition, while the wise learn to observe his own thoughts. He said that whoever masters the mind masters destiny, as all change begins. That as long as man seeks external culprits, he will remain trapped. Stubbornness is not just a lie, it is spiritual resistance. And life, patiently, will continue to repeat the pain until the mind surrenders to learn. There's a little remembered passage in his writings where Hill asserts that evil and foolishness are teachers in disguise. The wicked teach us to set limits. The fool teaches us to practice patience. The manipulator teaches us to discern. The ungrateful teach us to let go. The arrogant teach us to observe our own ego. Every human type is a mirror of our frailties. Nothing happens by chance, he said, not even the most painful encounter. The universe does not waste lessons, he wrote. But there's something that makes this reflection even more intriguing. In a rare interview, Hill was asked if he believed in truly evil. He remained silent for a few seconds and replied, "No, there are only minds dominated by fear." According to him, fear is the root of all evil. The man who fears losing power manipulates. The man who fears being forgotten lies. The man who fears being hurt, the man who fears not being loved, destroys. Evil, therefore, is fear raised to its maximum power, fear disguised as strength. The wicked man is simply a man who has chosen control over healing. And here comes the most mysterious point. Hill believed that fear is a form of living energy, almost an entity that feeds on the attention we give it. When we give in to fear, we give it power. It expands and begins to govern our choices. This is why he stated that the devil lives in the mind that fears, not as an external being, but as the result of the negative mental vibrations that man himself creates. Evil, therefore, is not somewhere outside of us. It is in the frequency of the thoughts we choose to feed. This perspective, which at first glance seems mystical, is now supported by studies on neuroplasticity and mental patterns. Our thoughts actually alter the structure of the brain. Each repeated emotion reinforces a neural circuit. Fear, anger, and resentment, when maintained for long enough, create automatic pathways that make us react in the same way over and over. Evil becoming a habit, as Hill described. The only way to break the cycle is to replace the pattern consciously, repeatedly, until the new vibration becomes. And then, the final revelation: neither evil nor foolishness have real power over one who has learned to choose their thoughts. Hill said that the disciplined mind is the shield of the spirit. Evil doesn't disappear. It simply loses. Ignorance doesn't disappear. It simply loses ground. Life will continue to place difficult people, unfair situations, and subtle temptations before us, but they will only have dominion while we are asleep. When consciousness awakens, the game changes. In the end, Hill didn't want us to fear evil, but to understand it. He knew that all destructive forces dissolve before the awakening. Perhaps this is the greatest paradox he left us. Evil doesn't need to be fought. It needs to be illuminated, because where there is light, darkness simply cannot survive. And then comes the doubt that paves the way for the next reflection. Evil is born of fear, and fear is born of what happens when someone learns to completely control their own thoughts. There are people who ask for nothing but take everything. Arrive with a gentle look, calm voice, a compelling story. Feel empathy, feel the urge to help. Before you know it, you're already into. Napoleon Hill called this type of person a master manipulator, architect of human emotions. He said the manipulator doesn't force the door to the heart. They open it with the right words. They know the power of guilt, the fragility of vanity, and the need to be helpful. There's someone who instinctively studies the other, understands what they want to hear, and delivers exactly that. They don't ask. They make you want to give. They don't demand. They awaken the desire to please. And when the trap closes, it's too late. Hill believed that the manipulator represents the most dangerous stage of the negative mind, because he masters the invisible game of intentions. He learned that the human mind moves by emotion, not reason, and uses this discovery to control those who don't know themselves. The manipulator knows that the fear of disappointment is stronger than any chain. He praises, then criticizes, and consoles. And in this cycle, he creates dependence. It's a dance of approach and withdrawal, a calculated move to keep the other off balance. Hill said that the manipulator feeds on the power to guide the wills of others, like a player moving pieces on an emotional board. Hill once told the story of a woman who, for years, believed she was helping a young artist. She paid his bills, financed his projects, and defended him from criticism. She said she saw in him a misunderstood talent. Over time, the young man began dictating what she should wear, who she should talk to, and how she should. He said it was for her own good, to protect her from the world. When she finally realized it, she no longer knew who she was. She had traded her own voice for an approval that never. Hill used this example to explain how the manipulator destroys without lifting it. They shift the axis of the other's mind until the person believes that obedience is freedom. But the scariest thing, according to Hill, is that the manipulator doesn't just operate in personal relationships. They can be found in companies, religions, social groups, even within families. Wherever there's a weak mind and another that understands fear, the game begins. Hill described the manipulator as a mirror of the psychological devil, not an external being, but a human force that grasps the power to influence thought. He wrote that those who master the fear of others control their destinies, and that's exactly what the manipulator does. They awaken the fear of loss, the fear of rejection, the fear of loneliness. They create emotional dependence and feed on it like a silent predator. And then the question arises, how many times have you believed you were choosing, when in fact you were just obeying a well-disguised suggestion? Hill asserted that the manipulator is fully aware of what he doesn't always feel guilty. He believes he's simply using the laws of the mind, applying them intelligently. But there's a difference between mastering the laws and distorting them. He uses them without spirit, purpose. And that's why his victory is always temporary. Sooner or later, manipulation backfires on the perpetrator because the universe responds to intention, not disguise. The manipulator thrives on other people's energy, and when it's depleted, he needs a new host. Constant search is his invisible punishment, never having peace, never having real connections, always living on the surface. There's also the other extreme, which Hill called the unrepentant rebel. It is the opposite of the manipulator, but equally trapped. The rebel knows what is right, chooses wrong. He has been warned, counseled, supported, and yet he defies life as if he believes that surrendering to wisdom is a loss of power, and he confuses freedom with rebellion. Hill viewed this type of person with compassion and sadness. He said that the rebel is a prisoner of himself, someone who fears his own potential and therefore sabotages. Every mistake is a cry of affirmation. No one will tell me what to do. But in the end, it is not the world that defeats itself. Hill once recounted the story of a young man who had inherited a small fortune. He was intelligent, full of possibilities, but incapable of following advice. He wanted to prove he could succeed alone, without help, without discipline. In less than 2 years, he lost everything. When Hill met him, the boy said, "I knew what to do. I just didn't want to listen." And Hill replied, "Then, life heard you and silenced you." This story became one of his most symbolic examples. The rebel doesn't ignore the truth. He knows it, but he defies it. And every time he defies, the universe responds with mirrors, repeated situations, identical falls, increasingly harsh lessons. Life speaks insistently until pride surrenders. And it is at this point that Hill revealed the logic behind these two figures, the manipulator and the rebel. The former destroys the other. The latter destroys himself. Both reject the natural law of balance. One believes he can control everything. The other will escape everything. Neither realizes they are trapped in the same web of illusion. Hill said that freedom is not doing what you want, but choosing what is right, even when you don't want to. The manipulator uses freedom to dominate, the rebel to challenge, the wise to understand. There's a rare passage in his notes where Hill writes, "The manipulator is the engineer of another's destiny, the rebel, the saboteur of his own." This phrase sums up the essence of the forces that most hinder human growth. Both live out of harmony, one through excessive control, the other through lack of direction. Hill believed that the universe acts like a mirror that reflects what we project. The manipulator attracts distrust and loneliness. The rebel attracts failure and repetition. Both live exhausted, unable to understand that the cure lies in surrendering to the wisdom they try more. Here comes the twist Hill liked to provoke. He asserted that every manipulator and every rebel carry within them the same seed of power that drives geniuses. The difference lies in the direction. The manipulator has focus and control, but uses it to dominate. The rebel has strength and boldness, but uses it to self-destruct. If both channeled these qualities for good, if they recognize their own responsibility, they would become forces of creation. Hill believed that the same energies that enslave also liberate, depending on the consciousness that guides them. But how many can see this before they lose everything? How many realize that what they call freedom is just a refusal to learn? For Hill, human destiny is a journey of internal transformation. The manipulators and rebels who cross our path are not accidents. They are mirrors, unwitting teachers. They reveal our blind spots, where we give in too much, where we resist too much. They are living lessons of mental power. And when we finally understand this, we stop hating them and begin to learn from them. In the end, Hill said that true strength lies not in domination or defiance, but in understanding. Understanding the other without being swallowed up by them. Understanding one's own rebellion without being guided by it. It is in this balance that the mind becomes truly free. The manipulator must learn humility. The rebel must learn direction. And both must understand that the universe responds not to the cry, but to the silence of consciousness. When silence arrives, something changes. Masks fall, illusions fade, and the soul, exhausted from struggle, finally surrenders to what Hill called the law of harmonic return. Life returns to each person the exact reflection of what it created. It is then that the manipulator feels the emptiness of having no one to admire, and the rebel feels the weight of having no one to understand. The cycle ends, and the learning process begins. Hill believed that this is the point at which man discovers the truth. Power lies not in control or resistance, but in alignment. And this is the key that unlocks the door to the final stage, the moment when discernment becomes compassion, and love finally frees itself from the illusion of saving or conquering. There comes a moment in life when silence becomes wiser than any advice. It's the moment you understand that you can't carry everyone, that you can't save anyone who doesn't want to be saved, that every soul has the right to weather its own. Napoleon Hill said that true compassion isn't interference, it's discernment. Helping with wisdom is as sacred as loving without control. And when this understanding matures within you, something changes forever. The weight that once seemed inevitable begins to dissolve, and love ceases to be effort and presence. Hill believed that the human mind is the field where the destiny of each life is decided. Everything we think, feel, and choose generates invisible waves that return to us as circumstance. Helping without awareness is throwing energy in the wrong, trying to alter the course of a lesson that does not. Helping wisely is participating in the flow of divine law, is being an instrument of harmony, not chaos. When you understand this, you understand that every clearly spoken no is as valuable as a loving yes. True altruism, not putting out other people, but lighting lights that can guide them in the fire. Life, in its perfection, teaches us what we need. No pain is useless. No delay is accidental. Hill said that the universe is a patient but unyielding teacher. It doesn't take offense if you don't learn. It simply repeats the lesson as many times as necessary. And the curious thing is that the more we try to shield someone from their own experience, the longer we prolong the cycle of pain. Sometimes, the most loving act is to allow the other person to walk alone if they stumble. Because the ground that hurts also teaches. All that hurts also awakens. Easy to love the blossom. The challenge is to love the process of growth, the phase in which the seed must break through the earth and face the darkness to find the light. But how do you apply all this to your daily life? How do you balance the desire to help with the need to preserve your energy? Hill suggested 3 simple and powerful inner movements. The first is observe without judging before rushing to solve someone's problem. Ask yourself, does this person want to grow, or does he want me to carry the burden for him? That question alone changes everything. The second move is act without expectation. Do good, but free yourself from the need for recognition. True gratitude doesn't come from outside. It comes from the state of inner peace of knowing you've acted righteously. And the third movement, I learned to withdraw with love. There are times when staying is attachment. Walking away is wisdom. Retreating is not giving up. It's respecting the other person's time and your own. Hill said that energy follows attention. Where you focus, you grow. If you focus your attention on those who don't want to change, you're feeding what doesn't evolve. But if you dedicate your energy to building, studying, loving, consciously, living with purpose, life reorganizes. The right people appear, opportunities align, and even pain. This is how the universe responds to clarity, by restoring balance. It doesn't answer prayers, it answers frequencies. When your vibration is one of wisdom and faith, what returns is expansion and abundance. Perhaps the greatest challenge is emotional detachment, letting go of the belief that you are the world's savior. Hill taught that no one awakens another soul by force, only by example. No words can open a closed heart, but there is something more powerful that can. Consistency. When you live what you believe, the world feels it. People notice, become silent, and begin to change through contagion. The presence of someone in balance inspires more transformation than 1,000 speeches about love and empathy. True spiritual maturity begins when you accept that others have the right to choose a path, even if that path leads, because pain is a teacher. And when it fulfills its role, something blossoms. Standing. Hill said that souls evolve not through comfort, but through contrast. It is friction that polishes the stone and challenge that awaits. Interfering in this process is robbing someone a chance to become strong. Wisdom is allowing life to teach what only life can teach. This doesn't mean hardening your heart. It means loving differently, possession, fear, without vanity. To love is to offer presence without imprisoning, to listen without trying to fix, to allow without abandoning. It's understanding that the light that guides others isn't born from your words, from your vibration. When you live with serenity, chaos loses its power. When you speak truthfully, fear loses. When you act with discernment, the world around you begins to align naturally. And this is where Hill's teaching becomes practice. Learn to protect your mind. He said the mind is like a garden. Plant blooms. If you plant worry, you reap anxiety. If you plant guilt, you reap exhaustion. But if you plant awareness, you reap freedom. Freedom to help without losing yourself, to love without exhausting yourself, to serve without being annulled. A disciplined mind is a shield against everything that saps your. Take care of what you think, and the universe will take. You didn't come into this world to patch up others' wounds, but to be a reflection, healing that's possible. And healing isn't about saving, about inspiring. It's about living in such a way that your presence becomes a silent invitation for others to awaken as well. Hill said, the best way to transform someone is to become an example of what they don't yet understand. Therefore, may your journey be a mirror of consciousness, not a field of sacrifice. There comes a time when everything that has been said boils down to a choice. Continue trying to change the world by force, or begin to illuminate it by presence. The second option is the path of those who have understood the law. And if you've come this far, perhaps this understanding has already begun within you. From today on, help with love, but with wisdom. Give with joy, but with discernment. Serve with faith, but without losing your center. As Hill said, balanced mind is the altar where life becomes divine. And if this video touched something in you, a memory, a pain, an awakening, let it continue to resonate. Write in the comments what you felt, even if it's just a word or just a point if you prefer anonymity. Your presence is part of this journey. Like this video, if it brought you clarity, share it with anyone who needs to hear. And subscribe to the channel to continue walking with us through the invisible laws that govern the mind and spirit. Because in the end, We are all learning the same lesson. Loving consciously, the purest form of liberation.